Okay, so we're starting chapter 10 today, and chapter 10 is actually going to do what chapter 9 said we can't do. Chapter 9 finished off saying that to understand this point that the Alter Rebbe made, and we'll go back to that point in a second, he says it's not possible to understand. We call this concept Rozo de Memnusa, the secret of faith. It can't be understood. What can't be understood? He said the idea that God and again, we're discussing in chapters 1 to 7 that the unity of nothing else exists outside of God. Chapter 8 through 12 are discussing how God is absolute oneness, no separate divisions, no levels, no concepts, no composite. It's all absolute, indescribable oneness. And now we started saying in chapters 8 and 9 that all the levels that we describe within God, Chochom and all this stuff, really are non-existent levels by God. To say any description by God is an insult, so to speak. We said, even to say that God is higher than the Chochmah is an insult. Why? It's like saying that the idea is so deep I can't touch it with my hands. The idea of any connection of God to any descriptive power is an insult. And by the way, it's not just physical powers, even spirituality. To say God has a connection to anything spiritual, say God has what's spiritual? Chachma, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, angels, Atzilus. To say God connects to any of that is almost an insult. Not almost, it is an insult. To say God is spiritual, the distance that we have in the physical to spiritual, the distance of spiritual to God is even more. In other words, we think of spiritual oftentimes as godliness. It's a spiritual, it's godliness. I felt spiritual. Your feelings, my feelings, meditations have nothing to do with God. It has to do with feelings, it has to do with spirituality. God has no connection to anything spiritual. Why? Because anything spiritual has a description. Anything you describe, was it Atzilus? It's an angel. It's a power of energy. All that stuff is nothing compared to godliness. As you said many times, as Alter Rebbe says in the Maimer, that the idea of God creating the world is not a compliment to God. If you say God, you're the creator of the world. It's like saying to a professor, you made a beautiful sandcastle. What's the connection between God and the world? There's nothing connection. And not just the physical world. The spiritual world is the highest world, it's the most spiritual world. So God has no connection to anything of any physical or spiritual or any religious or any dimension. Nevertheless, we say God is absolutely one with them. Even though God has no connection to them in any level, the distance between them is not even a compliment to say that God's above them. It's an infinite distance. Nevertheless, we said God is absolutely one with them at the same time. God is one with Chachma, God is one with Bina, God is one with Das, etc. And the question was, how's that possible? How could something that has no connection to you be absolutely one with you? It doesn't make any sense. The answer is, you're right. It doesn't make sense. Our mind can't grasp it. Don't try. It's one of the secrets of faith. It's a secret of the faith is that we can't understand godliness. It is out of our realm. God, yes. When you learn Torah, you become one with God. And when you do a mitzvah, you become one with God. And when you do, and God invests himself in Torah, and God's in the spiritual realms, but not because God is really there. It's because God did the impossible. He did the impossible to describe and understand. He made himself one with all of these levels. Like it says about Atzilus, God is one with the lights, one with the vessel, etc. That was chapter 9. Chapter 10, the Alter Rebbe is going to start off. So even though we can't understand it, let's try and understand it. Why is that? First of all, one of the novelties of the Alter Rebbe was to bring down, we know that the Rebbe compares often, especially in some of the very famous Shmosech, as we're doing now, this week, where Moshe tells God, why do you do this to the people? He wants to understand why. What's the idea of wanting to understand? So the Rebbe says this is similar to Alter Rebbe. Until the Alter Rebbe, the Hasidic perspective was that there are ideas that are above our understanding. It's out of our price range. It's out of our we can't relate to it. Comes along the Alter Rebbe and says we're starting something called Chabad. What does Chabad mean? We understand it. We're going to bring down that which is above logic into logic, that which is above seichel into seichel, that which can't be comprehended or understood, we're going to make it understood. The idea of Chassidus is to bring down the infinite into the finite, to make the things in life and spirituality that cannot be understood, try and understand. That's the first thing. The first thing is that is the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is to bring down l'mayla masechel into sechel. That's why we call it Chabad. Chabad means we try and understand, we try and realize what it means, and let's figure it out. And let's work. Even though there are things that seem to be, they can't be understood. The second thing is, while not everything can be achieved, it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. There's a very famous interpretation, or I don't know if it's famous, a very beautiful interpretation, when it says that God says to Avram Avinu, count the stars. He says, just like you can't do it, so too will be your children. Just like they can't be counted, so too will be your children. And one of the commentaries explained a beautiful thing. What does it mean, so too will be your children? He says, so too you can't count the stars, but you should try your best. Try. I'll finish off the job for you. So too your children should know that you can't accomplish everything in this world. You can't accomplish certain things. Let them try. I'll help them. I'll do the rest. So too will be your children wasn't referring just to the number of the stars, or to the concept that the stars are above the world, above the mazel. The idea of the stars not being counted is, don't worry about trying the impossible. Don't worry about the preschool is doing something. The other one, don't worry about trying to do that which is impossible, because we can achieve, not with our own strengths, but with Hashem's assistance and infinite. So he's going to start our chapter 10 with saying, even though you can't understand it, let's understand it. Okay. Chapter 10, it's on page 173, or Pei Zayin, halfway down. Again, if you're not seeing video, it's not my mistake. There's something wrong with the computer. Nevertheless, nevertheless, the Torah tries to speak in a way to sort of soften, to please the mind, to calm the mind, to calm the ear, not the ear. We try and talk to the ear. We use words about God throughout all of history, and it generally should know there's two perspectives that are used. There's the Chochom, the philosophers, and the Mequon, the Kabbalists. The Chochom, the philosophers, say whenever we use a metaphor for God, it has nothing to do with the thing we're trying to refer to. We use a metaphor just to try and find a way to relate to the concept. But it doesn't mean any connection. It's similar to using a color-coded system. The color has no connection to the thing you're referring to, but we use a color so to know. When we say this, we mean red means that, blue means that, yellow means that. The Kabbalists say, of course, it doesn't mean that we understand the idea. But there's a symbolic, there's an understanding. If you understand this metaphor well, like the body, if you understand the human body well, you can understand godliness, how the system works. We say many times, for my flesh, I understand God. If you understand a metaphor, if you understand an idea, understand the magnet, understand the gravity, understand electricity, you'll understand certain ideas and concepts. But it doesn't mean this is actually a matching parallel. It means there's some connection. So there's a difference between the Chochom and the Kabbalists. Here we're talking about the Kabbalists. The Kabbalists said, to make this simpler, we're going to use some things. The Torah allows, when Hashem gets upset or wants to do something, we say Hashem's anger. Hashem doesn't get angry. Hashem doesn't have a hand. He doesn't have a foot. He doesn't have Hashem's, when he shelters you, when he shields you, when he helps you and lifts you up. These are all metaphors we use to try and understand in our best, in our world, how to make sense to us. The Torah allows the usage of certain metaphors and descriptions, not because they're actually accurate. They're not. But because it helps us understand and relate. It gives us sort of a way to relate to godliness. He says, permission was given to the Kabbalists. They were allowed to give metaphors for the spheres. As we said in the last class, they gave colors to them, and there are colors associated. Every sphere has a color. Every sphere has a behavior, a character trait. It's chesed, is attraction. Gvura is rejection. Tiferes is really the mixture of both. It's beauty, but it's more than that. It's really it's the charisma. It's coming together. Each of the really Tiferes is best understood as empathy. Is really the best word for Tiferes, because you're modifying self or other. But Tiferes is empathy. But each sphere really has a character, a trait. Now, does it really have a trait? Is God's chesed really chesed? Could you call it chesed? No. But we give a description, and then we say chesed. Attraction has many things. There's love, there's kindness associated with it. There's all different. Each character has many subcategories that come from it. But it doesn't mean that there's really that description of God. It's the expressions we use. Some people come up with charts. There's very famous, charts, and they're good to use to know the system, the triangle, the three sets, everything is sets of three. But don't get caught up to think that that's actually a description of God. It's sort of a chart. These are all just metaphors. In that way, they came up, the sages, with a tremendous metaphor, which we all know many, many times. But Alter Rebbe is sharing with us now in a very beautiful way, the metaphor to understand God's spheres. God's spheres. The spheres, again, are Chochom, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. That's a Yesod Malchus. And really above it too is also the spheres. We can go above it. You can have Keser, you can have Ak, you can have etc. All these spheres, they gave a metaphor. That metaphor is the sun and sunlight. It's not the only metaphor used, but it's the most prominent metaphor used to understand the spheres. The spheres are called like lights of the sun rays. And like this he says. V'karu oisan oireis they shall yedei. Oops, I'm gonna jump here. Yeah, Kadei shall yedei hamashal hazeh yuvan lanu ktsas inyun hayichud shel Baruch Hu mideisav. And they called it lights. All the spheres are called lights. And they say, with this we have understanding of Hashem and his middays, Hashem and his relationship, as we'll see, if you could say relationship, could you say that? Between the sun and its attributes. The spheres. Shubaderech mashal, to understand it, it's Ka'ein Yichud Ein Hashemesh Abesech Guf Kader Hashemesh. It's to understand the sunlight as is found within the sun. Now, for those of us who are here since chapter 3 of this section, a couple months ago, maybe a year ago, I don't know when it was, excuse me, we also gave this metaphor. As we'll see, and it's very important to hold cup, as we say, to remember the metaphor that we brought in chapter 3, the same exact metaphor, the sunlight as is found within the sun, came to bring about the exact opposite point we're going to bring out here. The same metaphor that here we're going to bring out one theme, as we'll explain in a moment. It was brought down in chapter 3 in a whole different way, and therefore there are many differences. I'll try and keep remembering to point out all the differences that we're going to find in how it was said in chapter 3 and how it was said in chapter 10, our chapter. The one thing we have to know, and that will help us keep everything clear in our heads, is what is the purpose of the metaphor. Before we say what it's doing, what's the purpose of it? In chapter 1 through 7, we had one main theme of this Shaar Hayichud Chapter. Nothing exists outside of God. There is no such a thing as existence outside of God. Therefore, the metaphor was brought down to show that there is no existence, and we said just like the sunlight found within the sun, it doesn't exist. You can't point to it, you can't find it. The point was bittul. There is no sunlight there that exists. Absolutely nothing not. That's how is everything that you find in the world today. Since God's presence is everywhere, everything you see in the world is still within God's essence, and therefore doesn't exist. That was the point in very, very brief. What was the point in chapter 3? Because chapter 1 through 7 was pointing out nothing is outside of God. Chapter 8 through 12 is a whole different point. We want to bring out how everything that you see within godliness and God is all one. So now the metaphor is going to come to bring out not how nothing exists inside God, and the sunlight within the sun shows to be nothing. We're just the opposite. We're showing to be the sunlight within the sun as part of the sun. Instead of bringing out bittul, we're bringing out what's called yichud, oneness. It's a very important differentiation, and the whole direction, how we're going to explain things, is the opposite. In chapter 3, we wanted to point out the sunlight within the sun is non-existent, and therefore nothing exists outside of God. Here, in the second half of Shaar Hayichud, we're trying to show how God's complexity is really not complexity. It's really an absolute simpleness of no description. It's oneness. Nothing exists. There is no Chochom, there's no Bina, there's no Das. Nothing else exists, even though there is. It says, look how it is within the sun, how everything with the sun is one with the sun. We're not saying it doesn't exist. We're saying it's one with the sun. So the message we're bringing out is not bittul. On the contrary, we're showing inclusion. So it's a very opposite point of the metaphor. Again, in chapter 3, it was a show nothing exists within the sun. The sunlight that you see here burning, it could burn your skin and could start a fire and could literally give tremendous power and energy that we find from the sun is not found within even a speck. And we're millions of miles away. Within the sun is right there. It doesn't exist. Here we're saying that doesn't exist. It's all one thing. It's all one thing. So let's see now how we're going to see many differences. So the first, let's just start inside how he's reading it. Then we'll sort of point out a lot of the differences, a lot of the nuances. It's Kiyichud The light of the sun, as it's found within the sun, is shenikra ma'ar, and here he adds on the first extra thing. So the first extra thing we're adding on here is we didn't say in chapter 3 that the sun is called ma'ar. In chapter 3, always said the sun was called the sun. Kader Hashemesh, the ball of the sun, the orbit, what is it called? The orb of the sun. The sun. We never said that it's a ma'ar, that it's a luminary. That's a new word added in chapter 10, and we'll get to that in a minute. Second thing we'll do here is bring verses. We never brought verses in anything to prove anything in chapter 3. Here we're going to bring some verses. Like we find that the sun is called the Mar Hagad, the great luminary. Why is he bringing a pasuk? We already know that the sun from chapter 3, the sun is the sun. What are we adding on here? That's a luminary. That's the source of light. And then he says, and this spark, this ray of light that shines from the sun, is called sun. It's called light. And now he brings another thing. He brings us a pasuk to show what is light. What light is. We know what light is. The ray of the sun. He says, no, I want to tell you what it is. Like we call that the is called day. What does that add on here? We're going to explain what that means. Very important. These are very critical to understanding the whole point you want to say here. And now let's go back and read what we're saying here. When the light of the sun shines within the sun, it has no identity of its own. It's only one with the sun. So now it has no identity of its own. It's nothing. It has no identity of its own. It becomes one with the sun. So it's really part of a much bigger thing. We find a very interesting halacha, which I'm not going to go into it here, but there's a lot of talk on this chapter of the halacha. It's good to know about it. Two different rules. What happens when something is nullified of non-kosher and kosher. When something which is non-kosher falls into kosher. So there's a big difference if it's the same exact thing that fell in. Let's say, for an example, it was pieces of meat, and one piece of meat is not kosher, and the other two identical beef cubes are kosher. Or if a little bit of milk falls into a meat pot, or a little piece of cheese falls in, what's the difference? Whenever you're dealing with min b'minoi, a kind in its own kind, instead of saying that it's bottle in shishim, in 60, it's bottle b'reiv. As long as the majority is good, it's okay. So if you have one piece of, this is one of the reasons we have a custom of odd numbers in making eggs or certain foods in case there's something a problem. So it's nullified in the majority, at least 3 we say. But the point is that when you have 3 non-kosher pieces, 3 pieces of meat, and one's non-kosher, you don't know which one, they're all okay. Why? Because it's bottle b'reiv, it's lost in the majority. But when you have something that is not part of something, it takes 60. Why? Because what's the logic to it? The logic is when it becomes, and that means if you have one piece of dairy or pork falls into a milky soup, whatever it is, or the opposite, non-kosher, it becomes bottle and the whole soup is kosher if it's 1 in 60. When if it's the same thing as 1 in 3, 1 in bottle b'reiv. The logic is when it's the same thing, instead of fighting against the system, it becomes part of it. Meaning it becomes part of it. So it loses identity, it becomes part of it, and it's all good. When it's not part of it, the point is to destroy it, to knock it down, it has to become lost. It has to become destructive. So there's a time when sometimes we find something when it's in its own place, when its own similarities, it becomes part of the good, and therefore it's bottle. Another way to say it is that it's the opposite. If it can't become part of it, it's got to be destroyed. So the idea here of the light within the sun is more like that, where it becomes part of it. Instead of saying it's gone, it's being destroyed, it becomes part of the rest of the sun. And it loses its name. So let me go back and just say a couple things here. One of the points, let's explain Why does he say yom? Why does he have to say it is called day? Why can't he just say The reason for that is because we want to explain that when does become in its own name is only when it's day. What's day? When it's visible. As long as the is found within the source, it's there, but its name is never going to be a separate name. One of the things that the Rebbe asks is the Rebbe gives a talk on this subject here in 1968, or either the January 68 or December of 67, because it was Yutas Kislev. Yutas Kislev 1967/8. The Rebbe gave a talk and asked many questions on this whole thing here. He wants to know, why can't it have a name? What is the name? And it goes through and analyzes and breaks it down beautifully, this entire understanding of what is the metaphor coming to prove here, and what's the metaphor coming to prove in chapter 3. And he explains, why can't it have a name? Because it doesn't have an identity for itself. It doesn't have a name, not because it doesn't exist. It doesn't have a separate name. It's, I don't know, a good metaphor for this metaphor. Like, I was trying to think of different ways to think of a metaphor for this. But the point is, there is no separate entity of the light. The light is there, but
isn't that the light was created the first day?
Yeah, but when is it called light?
The sun came on the fourth day.
Okay, that's something else. Good question. That's a very good discussion. I don't want to get into it now, but it's another whole discussion of where the light came from and if it was the same light of the sun.
Why is it called light and not like a ray of the sun?
You mean why is the light
why here it's called or?
Or means ray. Or means light, the ray of the sun. When it says right here, it means light shining from something. Because referring to it as mar and or. Mar means a source, or means light. Now I'll just mention, now that you're saying this, I'll say the reason why we bring a pasuk for these things, because you want to describe what we mean. When you talk about the sun, and we'll see this as we get through further on the chapter, there are two parts of the sun that you can look at the sun. There are two identities of the sun. There's the sun as an orb. It's the sun. And then you have the sun as the Torah gave it a job what to do. This is why we bring a pasuk here. The Torah gives us a job to say what the job of the sun is. The sun on its own is a sun. The fact that it gives light is, a fire or a something cold. Everything has around it a sense of its essence. Its energy is felt on the outside. It's not a job. It's not the job of an ice cube to feel cool around it. Happens to be around the ice cube, you feel cool. Around certain things, you feel it. God gave a job to the sun to give light, but that job is only one aspect of the sun. The other aspect of the sun is that it's just the sun by itself. And whether it gives light or not doesn't matter and doesn't affect it, as we'll see later in the chapter, that the sunlight does not change in any iota if the light is being blocked. If somewhere 90 million miles from the sunlight's being blocked, the sun couldn't care less. It doesn't affect the sun, doesn't even know about it. On the other hand, everything else that's hashpah, let's take a hose filling up a pool, even though the hose could be 2 miles long. If there's blockage at the end, it's being blocked, you feel all the way back. Meaning there's a difference between how light is affected when there's something, how the source of light is affected when something blocks the light, and other things. So as we'll see, there's two aspects of the sun. There's the sun by itself that has no interest or concern in what happens around it. And then there's the sun as a luminary. Just we'll keep that in our back of our heads.
What about heat? Doesn't sound good.
Heat would be the same thing as a light, but here we're saying light for a reason here, and you'll see. Heat is another aspect of the sun, and in a way, it could be used similar, but here light has a much better metaphor, as we'll see the various effects of light. Now, so second to last line, when the sun is, when the light is in the source, in the body of the sun, it is in the state of absolute oneness. The state of the light is one with the sun to the point you won't give it a separate name, and that is the stage of absolute oneness. It doesn't like etzem echad. There's nothing there except one etzem shu guf ha'ma'er ha'meir. It is only the essence of the light that's giving light. So what could you see in the sun? You will not see a separate identity called the sunlight, because the sunlight becomes one with the sun. Almost like that meat that was not kosher, that got mixed up with other meat. You don't see any more non-kosher meat. All you see is kosher meat. It's not that the non-kosher meat, you don't see it because it's disintegrated. No, it's there, right in front of your eyes. But it's no longer an identity for itself. All you see is the kosher meat. All you see here is the sunlight. All you see is the sun. You don't see something separate because it becomes absolute oneness. Yeah, is that. And it doesn't have any identity for itself. It doesn't have any separate existence. The Alter Rebbe now is going to say something which is extremely unusual. He says, like this, and even more than this, exactly like this, and even more so. The reason why I say it's so strange, in a moment he's going to say, and this is not at all a metaphor. He says, and this is not at all similar. He says, and exactly like this, and even more so, is the understanding of the Atzilus, Chochma, all of God's essence and Himself. In other words, what's the metaphor? We try and understand how could it be that such in last chapter we said something that has no relationship with each other, has no comparison to each other, is suddenly becoming one. That Hashem and His Chochma, we said you can call Hashem Chocham and Rachum and Chanun. How could you call Him that? We said because even though there's no connection, they're still all one. How do you understand it? It's faith, it's absolute faith. Now he's telling you, I'll give you an example of such a thing. Where's such a thing? You have the sunlight, as is found in the sun. There's no comparison at all to the sunlight. The sunlight that shines from the sun is nothing. It's insignificant. It has no. Not only that, it's lost completely in the sun. It becomes one with the sun. Nevertheless, what's it called? The sun. So you see how you can have two opposites that become one. Two things that are polar opposites. The sunlight, which is nothing. It's a nothingness compared to the sun. The sun is billions of degrees in temperature, and it's an unbelievable source of energy. And nevertheless, we say the sunlight and the sun become one to the point it doesn't have its own name. It's one. So the Alter Rebbe is now giving us a way to have a little kernel of understanding this concept. You could have two things that have nothing in common. When I say nothing in common, I don't mean in character. They have in common. They're both hot, they're both light, they're both energy. But I say there's nothing in common in their levels. They're more distant than could be any physical human beings could imagine. Nevertheless, within the sun, it's not at one's bottle. They become absolute oneness. And that's what he wants to show us here, a metaphor, how our minds could begin to wrap around. Again, it's a metaphor. It doesn't mean this is all going to go all the way. There's huge differences between the sun and the sunlight and God and creation. But this gives us a little bit of a window to understanding how things that are opposites can actually become one. He said, think of the sunlight found from the sun. It becomes one with the sun. So too are Hashem middays. Hashem's Chochma and Hashem's this. But where do you see it? Only when it comes out. As long as within Hashem's essence, you don't see it separately. Once you have in the first stage of Atzilus, where the Netzalim are mamish one with Hashem, Him and His light, Him and His vessels are one. Then as you go through Bria, Yitzira, Siya, you actually can see Chachma, you can see kindness. And then you see it in the world. You see the Malach Machal, the Malach Gavril, and you can see it in different, and then finally see it in the actual, down to a physical person. A person can be kind, a person can be strict, a person can be, a giver, a person can be a not a giver. So you see that all these concepts that are found out here in the status of Yoim, where the herb becomes Yoim, where the herb is seen, are also found in the source, but there they have no identity for themselves. They're completely, not that they're non-existent, not batal, as I said before, but they're oneness. Absolute one. I'm sorry, we'll go Kaviyachal. Which God's essence is enclosed one with these middays, with Atzilus, and they become absolute oneness. Hashem's essence and the spheres become in a stage of absolute oneness. Why in Atzilus could you start seeing them as their own thing? Because they start becoming in their own space. That means they're netzlu. They're a little bit now as an aura. They're a little bit as the word I was looking for the other day was radiance. The radiance that's coming outside, they radiate, they're outside, meaning what's radiance? It's nothing more than you're feeling the sun. You're not actually feeling the sun. You feel the radiance, the heat of the sun. There's no separate existence causing light, no separate existence causing the warmth. It's the radiance of the sun. That's what Atzilus is. So the light, the Chacham of Atzilus, that's what we're describing here. Atzilus, and that's why, by the way, Atzilus is called Netzal. I call it Tzil. Netzal means to be radiant from, to be next to express. Mashal, al derech mashal, kederech espashas ermei hashemesh. Just like the light that comes out of the sun, once it comes out, you start seeing it. That same exact light that was found in the sun and is one with the sun is impossible to be seen. As it extends itself further and further, it begins to be seen as its own identity. And we should know it's not really its identity. It's really the sun that you're seeing. You're just seeing it in a way that it's a little bit further from its source. So you're seeing it as an identity as it appears. But in truth, what you're seeing is nothing more, nothing less than actual sun. It's the sunlight. Now the Alter Rebbe goes and says the other extreme. But not really. he started off saying it's this and even more so, but then he says not really. It's like one of the great things. I want to tell you exactly where I was. I'm not going to tell you exactly where I was. The Alter Rebbe is telling us a Tanya here. I'm telling you exactly how it is, but I'm not telling you exactly how it is. It's hard to understand unless you know that in Chassidus, a metaphor doesn't have to be complete in every aspect of the metaphor. What does that mean? If I want to bring out a metaphor, and I want to bring out a certain point, I don't have to say that every aspect of the metaphor. For an example, if I want to compare Hashem to the sun, I don't have to say Hashem is round. Oh, but you said the sun. Is he yellow? Is he white? I'm giving a metaphor of a certain point. As we're going to see, Alter Rebbe is going to warn us now, just because I gave a metaphor, that you could take out one aspect, don't make the mistake of applying the second aspect too. And he's going to show you a second aspect that you could take out of the metaphor. He says, don't make that mistake and take that. The metaphor only has one aspect that we're taking from it. What's that aspect? How you can have the achdus naflo, this oneness. What was the challenge we had in chapter 9 that we had to take on faith? Rather than this with the faith, that this is the secret, is how does two opposites become one? How does a God and the description of spheres, which are so beneath him, because any description is beneath him, become one, like the sun can become one with the sunlight. At the same time, he says, don't make the mistake of thinking the next stage. What's the next step? But it's not really the same as a sun. It's really in a way which is way out of our ability to understand. God's ways, we say this in the Haftarah every fast in the fast days. God's ways are out of our ability to understand. The tragedy that some people try and explain, we mentioned many times, the Rebbe said it many times, the Holocaust. Don't try to understand it. It's not possible. It is not possible for a human being to understand why God did the Holocaust. It's not like it's very difficult or it's very far or very hard. It's not physically possible. The human mind can't grasp it. God's ways are out of our ability to even wrap our heads around it. It doesn't have any relationship. When we call Makkah, nevertheless, even though it doesn't match this metaphor completely, as we'll see, nevertheless, to soften. Shachach comes like from the expression he says in the Megillah, the anger of the king was calmed. We find the king Achashverosh gets angry very often. He has a anger management issue. But after he does this crazy thing, he loses his temper, he kills his wife, or he kills Haman, whatever. As soon as he kills somebody, he calms down. Shechacha means to calm the ear, because the ear has a problem with this. Don't tell me we have a problem as logical, rational people when someone says things that make no sense. So 2 and 2 is 5. No. 2 and 2 is not 5. Don't go there. We can't handle things that are just obviously not true. When someone says something, so these two opposites come together. How? I'll tell you how. We just need a way to soften it that our minds can grasp it. Otherwise, we walk away with the thing of, it's the difference between almost like blind faith and a faith that we understand that it's something here, but we can't get it, meaning we're not going to understand it. It gives us a window that there's something to grasp to. Nishma v'nisbeinin, we can understand and hear some of this idea, not all of the aspects of God, but one aspect, the unity of God and the spheres from the metaphor of the sun and the sunlight. So what are we negating here? What are we saying Hashem is not like? And this is the important part. Don't think for 1 second that Hashem has the quality of a mar. What's the quality of a mar? A mar's quality is that I have a job to do. And my job is important to me. It's one of the things that we know in life. A person who is not doing something and accomplishing feels valueless. There's a very famous metaphor my father gave many times. It's a true story. But it's my father, I think it's a true story. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. But it's a metaphor we bring many times about this person who the king was once traveling, and he sees this guy who's working in the field with the scythe, with a big, thing, and waving it, cutting the wheat. And he's amazed at the grace, the arms, the skill, the way this guy is doing the work. And he's standing there mesmerized with the beauty of this guy working. He says to himself, you know what? I'd like to hire this guy to sit in my palace and do this. Like I'll sit every afternoon, have him do for an hour or two, and it'll be a geschmack. I'll sit, and he'll pay him. So the king hires to go to the guy. Says, you know what? I'll hire you to sit 3-4 hours a day in my palace and in the room where we're having dinner, lunch, and just do this and do this moment. He says, I don't have to cut any wheat just to do it. He says, just cut. Bring your tools. He does it, and he's loving it. But after a week or two, he feels like an idiot. He has nothing to show for his work. He's nothing to show. Meaning, a human being needs to produce. That's our nature. We were created to do something. We were created for a purpose. When is a person most down and melancholy? And if I don't know if anyone here had a day or two they couldn't go to work, they sat in bed all day. it is such a feeling after a day or two. You can go on vacation and do nothing, but then you get why do we feel like when we do nothing? Because it's against our nature. Our nature is to be productive. The most happy feeling we have, we accomplished something. Even if it was a job that wasn't so glorified. I cleaned the kitchen. I organized the garage. Wow, it feels good. You see what you did. You can look what you did. I made a meal. I cooked. I built a house. I painted. I did something. When you don't do something, your self is diminished. The sun, because its job and description, we said as far as the essence of the sun is concerned, it doesn't have a need for anything. But as far as God's biblical, when we say the Torah psukim, it means we asked before, why do we mention psukim? Because we're talking about the biblical perspective. As the sun is found with the Torah, and the Torah is given a job. You're the mar. If the sun's not shining, he's not fulfilling his mission of being a mar. So in the sun, the recipient, and if there's or not, affects the sun. Not necessarily a psyche. The sun says all the planets are intelligent, but it doesn't mean the suns are going to frustrate it. But the sun's wholeness is lacking if it's not giving light. He says, don't make that mistake by God. Don't think that by God, if he is God's a source of creation, and if the creation is lacking, somehow God's lacking, or if something didn't happen, or something failed. There's nothing in this world that affects God's in any way, shape, or form in his essence. It could go this way or that way. It could be up, or it could be down. It could be light, shining, not shining. God is not a mar. He is a God. So as far as the metaphor of the oneness that's found in the light within the sun, that is an absolute. He says this is a metaphor, and even more than that. What is even more than that? Because it can't really fool it, but the point is amazing. This is the oneness that's found with the light of the sun within the sun. That is the amazing metaphor to explain the oneness of Hashem and His spheres. Unbelievable metaphor. He says, but don't take it to think it's a distant mistake to try and apply it. Oh, 1 second. Just like the sun gives light, if the sun doesn't give light, it's a broken sun. No. Hashem does not have any need for the to complete himself. And that's where he says, don't take it. It's above our understanding. It's above our ability. If we try and think of God as a mar, in the sense of the sun being a mar. And that's where he says, don't go. Let's see this inside. He said, "Loy mamish v'derech zeh, rak v'derech v'chik v'flo ma'aseh zenu, ki gavu d'rachim v'dakeinu, mikol makam ha'shacha eisen, nishma v'nesmenu mashal Hashem, Hashem yuchad u'batel v'mkerei, v'eina eil b'shem kal v'nei atzmai. V'dak shar mokar levadei." And we said, what was the part we used the metaphor for? Just to explain how the sphere is absolutely one with Hashem, like the light of the sun is found within the sun, where it's there. Or like we said in chapter 3, that it's batal. We're not saying it's batal, we're saying it's one with the sun. He says, therefore, as Hashem also, none of these things have separate names within Hashem. You can't say that's the Chochom, and that's the Rachom, and that's the Chanun. No. How it's found within the sun, it has no identity separate from God. It's one with God. It's absolute oneness. But how it comes out of the sun, the status of Yoim, when it reaches the level of daylight, when it comes out, he says, yeah, there you can give it names. So that's what the metaphor of as explained the Torah. Yoim, when light comes out of the sun, when it comes to us, when it's in the world of Atzilus, then we can start saying metaphors or descriptions of Racham V'chan, Elagabe Nevroim El Yerim V'Tachtonim. It's only regarding the higher creations, like an Atzilus and lower creations, Shabi Yosem V'Chayesam and Agosam, that their essence, their life, their conduct, Shakadosh Baruch Hu Mahava Machayesam, Umenegu V'Tzorach Masav V'Nasav V'Dayt V'Abbas Bleshes V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'V'We'll stop here. Basically, it's only there where you start seeing each of the spheres as they are for identity for themselves. So what did we start accomplishing? Just to recap real quickly, in chapter 10, we started saying, even though we said in chapter 9, it's something that the mind can't grasp by these two polar opposites. You can't even say polar opposites. These two things have nothing in common, are become one, Hashem, and to be called a Chacham. We started saying it, even though we can't understand it. The truth is, there is a link, a little bit of a kernel of how we can understand it with the metaphor of the light of the sun, how it's found within the sun. Not as we said in chapter 3 that it's batal, but it's saying here in chapter 10 that it's one with Hashem. It's all the source, doesn't have a separate identity until it comes out in Atzilus, etc.